The ancient history of Westeros is steeped in bloody sagas that span millennia. But few conflicts have been as devastating as the Dance of the Dragons, a civil war that tore the Targaryen dynasty in half, nearly extinguished the lineage of dragons, and laid waste to an entire kingdom. We often believe this destruction was rooted in struggles for the throne, intricate schemes, and raw ambition. But what if I told you that it all began with a much more personal tragedy? Do you remember how the unbreakable bond between two young girls, Rhaenyra Targaryen and Alicent Hightower, slowly devolved into bitter enmity? Today, we're going to focus on that exact point, that critical turning point. What if Rhaenyra Targaryen and Alicent Hightower had remained childhood friends? How would the destiny of all Westeros have changed? This isn't just a what-if scenario. It could be the key to unlocking an unknown, perhaps far brighter future for the Targaryen dynasty and its dragons. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand the profound impact of a kingdom, but also the immense power of friendship and the steep price of betrayal. Anyone who's watched House of the Dragon knows that the story of Rhaenyra and Alicent wasn't merely about a struggle for the throne. It was a poignant portrayal of how the closest of friendships can slowly be poisoned by external forces and personal fears. When King Viserys, through an unexpected decision, chose Alicent as his new queen, the destinies of these two young women began to diverge irrevocably. One of the most critical catalysts here was Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King. Otto's relentless ambition, his fervent desire to place his own grandson on the throne, constantly incited Alicent against Rhaenyra. Alicent's own loneliness and insecurity, born from growing up without a mother, also played a part. This emotional void made her more susceptible to her father's insidious influence. The crisis of succession gripping the kingdom, the whispers surrounding the alleged illegitimacy of Rhaenyra's children, and Alicent's primal instinct to protect her own sons, especially Aegon, all these factors progressively deepened the chasm between them. These two women, once the closest of confidants, now stood on opposite sides of a conflict poised to tear the kingdom apart, as bitter enemies. With trust morphing into betrayal and affection into animosity, the stage for the Dance of the Dragons was set, embarking on a path from which there was no return. Now, let's step away from that grim painting for a moment and ask ourselves, what if none of this had happened? What if those initial seeds of discord had never been sown? If Alicent had resisted her father's manipulations, or if King Viserys' marriage choice had been different, and most importantly, if the pure, sincere friendship between these two women had never fractured, how would the destiny of Westeros and the Targaryen dynasty have charted a completely different course? If the unique bond between Rhaenyra and Alicent had remained unshaken, it would most likely have prevented the deep division between the Greens and the Blacks from ever beginning. The intrigue and tension within the court would have significantly diminished, narrowing the scope for manipulative figures like Otto Hightower. This is because Queen Alicent would have had a shield and a pillar of support against her father's ambitions. Queen Rhaenyra. Combined strength of these two powerful women, the future Queen Rhaenyra and Queen Alicent, would have resolved the ambiguities surrounding the succession. Perhaps Viserys would never have fallen victim to that critical misunderstanding on his deathbed, as the issue of succession would have been settled much earlier and more clearly through the shared will and consensus of Rhaenyra and Alicent. The main spark that ignited the Dance of the Dragons would have been extinguished before it even caught fire, saving Westeros from being plunged into a bloody civil war. This wasn't just a possibility. It could have been one of the greatest what-ifs in Targaryen history. In this alternate reality, the lives and destinies of many supporting characters would have been completely rewritten. Daemon Targaryen, with Rhaenyra's position as heir less threatened, might have been less aggressive, taking on more of a role as a trusted advisor or protector. Perhaps he would have become a more stabilizing figure within the Targaryen family, finding greater peace on Dragonstone. Alicent's children would have grown up not with a burning ambition for the throne, but as princes and princesses imbued with the honor of the Targaryen lineage, forging different paths for themselves. Aegon might not have been a reluctant king, but perhaps an explorer venturing across Westeros with his dragon, or he might have gone down in history as a scholar or an artist. Helena would not have borne the crushing weight of her family's conflicts, and her prophecies might have pointed towards a more peaceful future. And most importantly, the most agonizing spark of the Dance of the Dragons, the tragic confrontation between Lucerys and Aemond at Storm's End, would never have occurred. The lives of those innocent young men would have been preserved, and no more Targaryen blood would have been shed. This would have prevented generations of deep wounds from forming, leading Westeros down a fundamentally different path. The continuation of this friendship would have preserved the strength and prestige of the Targaryen dynasty. The Civil War, by weakening the dynasty, nearly eradicating their dragon lineage, and fracturing the most powerful houses, had ultimately paved the way for their downfall in Westeros. If Rhaenyra and Alicent had fulfilled their queenship duties in collaboration, their alliance would have solidified the dynasty's power, perhaps ushering in subsequent generations to a less bloody inheritance and a more stable kingdom. The Targaryen dragons, without the devastating losses of the Dance of the Dragons, would have continued to thrive, remaining the paramount power in Westeros. This scenario wouldn't just affect the Targaryens, it would resonate throughout all of Westeros. Future events, even the plot of Game of Thrones centuries later, would have been profoundly altered, potentially leading to a longer period of peace and sustained Targaryen rule across the continent. Perhaps even the threat of the White Walkers would have been met by a much stronger, more unified kingdom. It's not just a what-if question, but a contemplation of an alternative to one of the most significant tragedies presented in the series. The continuation of Rhaenyra and Alicent's friendship, a powerful and fascinating scenario that could have changed the fate of an entire kingdom, potentially averting a tragedy as monumental as the Dance of the Dragons. This what-if question starkly reminds us just how profound and devastating the consequences of every decision and every relationship can be in House of the Dragon. Sometimes, the greatest wars begin with the breaking of the smallest bonds within hearts. So, what are your thoughts? Do you believe Rhaenyra and Alicent's friendship could truly have prevented the Targaryen civil war? Or would their destinies still have led them to another tragedy? Share your thoughts, your own what-if scenarios, and your predictions on this topic in the comments below. Join the discussion. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more what-if scenarios, series analyses, and in-depth explorations. See you in the next video.